And we're back. Mr. Gavin and Mr. Wright are both in the judge's chamber. Who thought today would turn out like this? May I? Who are you? Huh? What? Hello, sir. Please, pick a card. What's all this about? Is this one okay? Excellent. I have a message for you. The last hand is about to be played. You'll need a trump card to make it. Trump card? The card you have chosen is magical. Use it wisely, and the game is yours. That's all. An ace? Where do I remember that card from? Mr. Smith's hand has 3 aces and Mr. Wright's 2. It is 5 aces in all. It is true. I've seen it! The 5th ace! It was cheating, I swear to you. Oh, right. I was supposed to do that in the fake Russian accent. Missing 5th ace! Wait, this blotch of red. This blood? You have your trump card. Now it's up to you to cut the deck and draw. Now it's up to you to cut the deck and draw the truth. My father's fate is in your hands. I know you can do it. Oh, thanks, mysterious girl. This bloodstained card is my trump card for finding the truth? I fell deep into thought as my mind raced to understand what this all meant. That girl... Seen her recently, but where? That's when I made the connection. Oh. She has the same kind of hat, just a different color. Completely different people, though. Could this be the missing 5th ace? April 20th. 2:45 p.m. Man, it has been going on a while. Didn't this start at like 10 a.m.? So almost 5 hours now. Court will now reconvene you. Defense Attorney Christoph Gavin, will you please take the stand? Now then, if you would, Mr. Payne. Will will the witness state his name and occupation? Is this farce necessary, Your Honor? Believe me, far stranger things have gone on in this courtroom, and it's all because of Phoenix Wright. Fine, I'll play along. First, there's one thing we need to have made clear. How did you know about the secret beneath the victim's hat? By secret, I'm guessing he means the fact that Mr. Smith was bald. Forgive my curiosity, but what is it about this fellow's head? Your Honor seems to have an inordinate interest in it.
Objection!
Whoa. Oh, hi, Phoenix. What's up? I wouldn't call it inordinate, Mr. Gavin. Oh, yeah, here we go. Mr. Wright? What do you think you're doing, Wright? Wow, things sure look different from the other side. You know what I mean, Apollo? Speaking of looking from the other side, let's consider something for a second. The victim wore that hat all night, never once taking it off, except for that one time. That one time being the instant he was hit? Oh. When Mr. Wright returned from reporting the crime, that hat was laying on the floor. Mr. Wright picked it up and placed it on the victim's head. In other words, in order to have seen Mr. Smith's bald head, he would have had to been there in the hideout, at the time of the crime. In other words, I must be the real killer, is what you're trying to say. Not bad, Apollo. Papa. Mr. Gavin? I'm afraid that I haven't been entirely honest with the court. What? Oh, I assure you, I had the noblest of intentions. I did it all to protect my client, Mr. Wright. Yet I'm afraid in the current situation, I see little reason to hide anything. Very well. Allow me to tell you the truth of what happened that night. Finally, you may begin your testimony. Tell us, How were you involved in the events that fateful night? Oh my god, dyslexia is powerful. Witness testimony. That fateful night. The rage I sensed in that man that night troubled me, so I returned to the club. I went down to the basement and peeked in through the little window to the hideout. It must have been right after the murder took place. The victim was dead, as he appears in the photo. A bald head, an unconscious girl, and Wright holding a bottle in his hand. I sensed that was not the best place for me to be at the time, so I left. That's when the call came from Wright. So, you witnessed the murder? For better or for worse, I missed the actual moment of the deed. Mr. Gavin, may I remind you that you are on Wright's defense team? Your testimony is clearly disadvantageous to your client. What else could I say? I'm standing on the witness stand, after all. So you are, Mr. Gavin. And you had to testify as you just did. And you had to tell them you saw the scene of the crime through that little window. That's Mr. Wright? You had to say that. Because that was the only probable window of opportunity. Right, Apollo? Oh. Mr. Wright, the defense should do the cross-examination, not the defendant. Mr. Justice, are you prepared? Yes, Your Honor. I can't believe I'm going up against Mr. Gavin. This trial's getting weirder and weirder. The rage I sensed in that man that night troubled me, so I returned to the club. That man, you mean Mr. Smith? He was different from the other customers, his aura, shall we say. I knew he was a serious poker player, but it was more than that. So then you knew the true nature of your client's job. Of course, but I also knew he wasn't engaged in gambling, which would be illegal. Well, it makes sense that he'd know. They were friends after all. Worried for my friend, I returned to the club. You see, I feared this Mr. Smith might be someone coming to settle an old score. I see. What happened then? I went down to the basement and peeked in through the little window to the hideout. Little window? You mean the one used to keep watch up the stairs? Yes, a relic of the ancient past. The black marketers used it, I believe. Why did you go through the trouble of peeking in through the window? Wouldn't it have been easier to just open the door and go into the room? I didn't want to upset Wright, you see. Upset Mr. Wright? Yes. What if my fears had been unfounded? I'd be walking in on their batch. Bad form, to say the least. So far, everything he's saying kind of makes sense. Oh, no, go back. There we go. How do you know it was right after the murder? Really, no need to shout, Justice. I was just getting to that part of my testimony. Ah, there he is. The coolest defense in the West, we know and love. Even when you're standing up there on the witness stand, some things never change. I was afraid you'd change too, Wright, but you haven't. You and that overbearing personality of yours. With friends like these, who needs enemies? By photo, you mean the second photograph of the crime scene? Precisely. You see, he wasn't wearing his hat then. I saw his head when he was dead. And then Mr. Wright came along and replaced his hat. Can you describe the scene of the crime for us? A bald head and an unconscious girl, and Wright holding a bottle in his hand. Back up. There. Nope, that's not the press button. Those were the only three at the scene of the crime? Yes, as far as I saw at least. And we're back where we started. The killer was the defendant, Phoenix Wright. Who else could it have been? But why didn't you talk to the police? 2 reasons. First, I didn't actually witness the very moment of the crime. Second, my office was asked to defend Mr. Wright. Even after seeing what I had seen, I couldn't abandon my friend. Objection! There must have been someone else there at this moment of the crime. Justice, I just said I saw no one. Not a soul. But that goes against what Mr. Wright said. Yes, this mysterious fourth person. Who would conveniently be the real killer, I suppose. Glad to see we agree, Mr. Gavin. Let me pose a question, then. Tell me, what possible reason did the real killer have to swap the cards in the victim's hand? Perhaps you can show us a reason why such a thing would be necessary? How can I show something I can't find myself? Remember, Apollo, the card that was swapped out was the fifth ace. Fifth ace. Right. Well, Mr. Justice, the question of why the killer would swap out the card has been raised. Can you point to a reason? Not yet! No. Not yet, Your Honor. Not yet? Pathetic. Not yet. Try not ever. Well, Mr. Gavin? I'm willing to wait for as long as it takes. Right, I don't even know what the heck I'm looking for. Apollo? Yes, sir. Don't forget, you already know the answer. You just don't realize it yet. Already know the answer? Take a moment to think it over again, okay? Wouldn't it have been better to wait for the police to arrive? Remember though, by that time I was already Wright's defense attorney. It wouldn't do for me to become part of the investigation. That makes sense. Or does it? I'm confused. Well, what happened next? That's when the call came from Wright. Where were you when the phone call came? I had already left the Borscht Bull Club by that time. On the phone, he asked me to defend him. Naturally, I was surprised. I accepted, however. I couldn't abandon him. So kind of you. So far, everything jives with Mr. Wright's testimony, I think. Is it going to be a problem for you to cross-examine your own boss? I'm fine. Who was it that taught me to never pull punches in cross-examination? It was you, Mr. Gavin. I learned it from watching you. Well. Was it this one? Objection! Sure. And go ahead and point out your reason, Mr. Justice. Why did the killer take the fifth ace? Here. Take that! My reason is this. Is that an ace? Why, it's got blood on it. Right next to the spade. What? This is insane! Why wasn't I told about this? Could this be the missing fifth ace? Inconceivable! How could you? What are you doing with that card? Well, that's the thing. Why is Mr. Gavin so upset? It's just a fishy card from some fishy girl. Oh, that card? It's mine. That is, I picked it up at the Borscht Bull Club that night after the murder had occurred. I gave it to my daughter. Cards are stock in trade after all. No. Impossible. Unacceptable. The court can't accept this evidence. It's a fraud. Fraud? How can you be so sure? What? I would think the only person who could claim that it was a fraud would be the one who took it from the real card. Would be the one who took the real card from the crime scene. The real killer. But you just said that you took it. Anyway, allow me to elaborate. What if this trace of blood was the reason? The reason for the killer to take the card from the scene of the crime? Where are you going at with this? Take another look at the photo. And the victim's head. I turned on autoplay by accident. At the moment of the crime, his hat fell to the floor, and a trickle of blood ran from his forehead down the back of his head. Couldn't a drop of that blood have fallen on one of the cards? I suppose. The killer then took the card to hide the blood. Regardless, that evidence is non-permissible. Uh-huh. Right. Regardless of how you wasted the last 7 years, you used to be a lawyer. You know what a serious crime it is to conceal evidence. We can discuss the finer points of our legal system later. What's important now is that I've answered your question. What are you talking about? You wanted to know why the killer would have taken the card from the crime scene. And now I've told you. That one drop of blood would have been decisive evidence, you see. This baseless conjecture! Baseless! Oh, that's me! That's not me. Oh, I assure you, it's quite based. It is quite based indeed. Based on what? It's amazing, really. How a single drop of blood on a single card can lead us to the truth. It's quite simple. Well, Apollo? Yes? Try picturing the scene of the crime. In your head. Oh, 3D! Look at this tech! The murder took place in the hideout. The body of the luckless victim was found in the poker table. And, before the killer swapped the card out, there was a single card with a drop of blood on it in the victim's hand. Given this, there is one decisive problem with this scene. Well, what is it? Let's keep it simple, shall we? Given that there was a drop of blood on a card, whose position in this diagram doesn't fit? The victims? The killers? The witnesses? The second witnesses? Whose position doesn't fit with the bloody card? Why, that would be the victims. Well, isn't it the victim's position that's the problem? I don't follow your logic here, Mr. Justice. Well, look, the victim was struck on the head, sending him back in his chair. You'd think that any blood would fall behind the body, not onto the table in front of him. Take a look at the photo again. If he bled in this position, the blood would fall on the floor, not on the cards. Why, that's right. So, what does this mean? Evidently, we were sitting in swivel chairs. Swivel chairs? Oh man! Imagine how much fun you could have in those. Apollo, try turning the chair around. Okay. Can I, like, actually move it? Okay, I guess it's just with the space. There we go. Chair was facing the other way? It would have to be. So, we have to assume that at the time of the murder, the victim's chair was facing away from the table. When Mr. Wright returned from informing the police, which way was the chair facing? When I came back to the room, the body was facing as seen in this photo. That would mean the killer turned the chair back around. Let's take the next step. Look at the diagram once more. We know now the victim was facing away from the table at the time of the murder. But this creates another significant contradiction. Again? Let's test your reasoning skills again, shall we? Apollo, whose location on this diagram contradicts our new understanding of the crime? The victims? The killers? The witnesses? The second witnesses? Whose location creates a contradiction if the victim was facing this way? I mean... So what exactly are we trying to point out? I mean, it's very clearly like, oh yeah, it's like the murderers, right? Oh yeah, the killer's position. There we go. Take that! The victim was struck from the front, correct? Indeed. Well, wouldn't it be hard for the killer to hit him from the front? Sitting where his indicator currently is? I would think it'd be quite hard, yes? Yes, but what you're saying makes no sense! Why would the victim suddenly turn to face the wall in the middle of a game? I believe a sufficient reason will soon come to light. What? There's something in this diagram that makes far less sense, actually. Look again at the diagram. Apollo, if the victim was struck while he was sitting as shown here, where would his assailant be standing? By marking it on the diagram. What? But there's no room to put a mark where the killer should be. Don't worry. Let's think it through and see what we find. We know the victim was facing towards the wall at the time of the crime. That's the only thing we know for sure. Try to forget about everything else. Where would the killer have to be standing to strike our victim from the front? Well, in the bookcase. The killer had to be standing, well, here. You get points for flair, but that's about all you get. Ugh. And I was onto something there too. I hardly need to point out that standing there would be impossible. The victim is facing a solid cupboard. Or are you claiming the killer climbed the cupboard and hit him from above? It's simple logic, really. If this was the only place the killer could have been standing, then that means that, at the very moment of the crime... Wait. I know. At the moment of the crime, the cupboard wasn't there. What's this now? I mean, that's the only explanation. Right, Mr. Gavin? Your Honor, I have a suggestion for the defense. We should arrange to examine the cupboard in the hideout immediately. Bailiff, send a team to the crime scene immediately. Have them try to move the cupboard. Your Honor, what? There's one more thing your men should look for. Please give this to the bailiff. Yes, I see. You do belong in the courtroom after all, Mr. Wright. I do my best. Let's forge ahead here while we wait. Look at the diagram once again. It's been changed. If the killer was standing here at the time of the crime, then this cupboard wasn't here. Which means... Apollo, try moving the cupboard. Oh! Thank you. As you can see, the cupboard was the problem. At the time of the murder, it has to have been as shown here. Now everything is in place to reconstruct the moment of the crime. Oh my! What's this? What is it now? Look at the diagram of the crime scene once more. It appears we found yet another contradiction. What I believe to be the final contradiction, in fact. Oh, dang! Hot skippity! Notice something, Apollo? Our line of deduction is rapidly approaching its logical conclusion. Now then, Mr. Justice, please point the new contradicting indicator. Is it the victim, the killer, the witness, the second witness? Right here. Kind of no window anymore. About this cupboard. Are we all okay with assuming it was moved? Sure, why not? Well, if it was, something really doesn't fit. The cupboard would completely cover up the window by the stairs. That's right. Somebody standing outside wouldn't be able to see in. Someone like Mr. Gavin. What? What did you say? Is the coolest defense in the West. Losing is cool. Don't expect me to play along with your little game, right? It's only a game until someone gets killed, Mr. Gavin. And someone was, while the window to that room was blocked by a cupboard. So, Mr. Gavin, perhaps you'd like to explain to the court? Exactly where did you witness the crime scene from? Excuse me, Your Honor. Order! This is a court of law and I will have order. We just now received word from our investigative team at the Borscht Bowl Club. They've examined the cupboard in the hideout, Your Honor. Oh? And what did they find? Well, Your Honor, it turns out there's a secret passage behind it. What? Landester? Ah, yes, I believe I mentioned something of the sort before. This is one of the tricks to the room that many of our regulars know about. I do remember him saying something about that now that he mentions it. Secret passage is a handy thing to have when you're engaged in illegal going-ons. Never know when you might need to duck away from the eyes of the law. So the room has a secret passage. Where does it go? The other side connects to the restaurant above. The underworld bosses could get away from the cops and enjoy a cold bowl of borscht, no doubt. Just like our killer. Ugh. You see where our line of simple deductive reasoning has led us, Apollo? I see it, but I don't believe it. That girl wasn't kidding when she said I needed this trump card for the last hand. Time of the murder. The window was blocked and the victim's hat was only off his head for the few minutes between Mr. Smith's murder and Mr. Wright's return from calling the cops. In other words, the only place anyone could have seen the victim's bald head was from inside the hideout. Well, Mr. Gavin? Say something. Dare I ask what really happened that night? Actually, I think we can probably figure it out ourselves at this point. That night, for whatever reason, our killer had a date with Mr. Smith. A date with destiny. There, he crouched, hidden in the secret passageway behind the cupboard, holding his breath, waiting for just the right moment. Then the chance came, and he took it. Alg! Eek! Why did you do that? Wait here, I'll get help! Miss Olga O'Reilly was out cold, struck by Mr. Smith. But his time was soon to come. Mr. Wright went upstairs to call the cops, leaving Mr. Shady Smith alone in the hideout with the unconscious dealer. Then our killer stepped out from the secret passage and into the hideout. The victim must have heard the cupboard sliding aside. He wheeled his chair around to look, and after the deed was done, the criminal must have seen the blood on the card. He would have, of course, realized the need to destroy the evidence. A single spot of blood told the whole story of the crime. Too bad for him, he didn't linger any longer than the hideout that night. If he had, he might have noticed the cards on the floor, and the fact that they were all red. Ugh. Well, it seems this trial has taken yet another turn. I'm truly, truly sorry I had to see this day come, Mr. Gavin. Mr. Gavin? Mr. Payne! Yes, Your Honor? The prosecution will continue its investigation. As for Mr. Phoenix Wright, the defendant, he is hereby cleared of all suspicion. Believe me when I say that I don't believe this is happening, Mr. Gavin. But I'm afraid the circumstances call me to issue a warrant for your arrest. Immediately. Objection! Oh, no need to apologize. I rather enjoyed myself. It's not every day you get to witness a legendary attorney's dirty tactics firsthand. Your point, Mr. Gavin? Frankly, Your Honor, I'm shocked that a person of your caliber would be taken in by such a low-grade parlor trick. Excuse me? The defendant is cleared of all suspicion? This is hardly the time for jokes, Your Honor. Mr. Wright hasn't proven anyone's guilt or innocence here. What he has done is use illegal evidence to point the blame on someone else. And not just anyone else, but me, his own defense attorney. Illegal evidence? Objection! Let me ask you, Mr. Gavin, is there still any reason at present to suspect me of wrongdoing? Of course. This bottle, for instance. A bottle of grape juice that's totally not wine Mr. Wright was drinking. How do you intend to explain away the fingerprints on the murder weapon? And not just any fingerprints. Am I right, Mr. Payne? Actually, yes. The fingerprints on the bottle were, upside down. I seem to recall this being an issue earlier. The court, in this case, demand an explanation. I can think of only one reason why one would hold a bottle upside down. and that is to hit someone with the bottom of the bottle. Well, Your Honor. See how the codfish squirms to the last. Well, Apollo? Yes? Your boss seems awfully concerned about this bottle still. But I'm sure you can come up with a suitable explanation. Just like that. Yeah. Just like what? Why would anybody grab a bottle upside down under the... Don't let him trick you into thinking his explanation is the only legitimate one. Is there really another? Take another look at the court record. I believe you'll find a simple answer there, in plain sight. How about you just say the answer in plain words? Alright. Single blow to the forehead. To put the bottle back on the table? To pull the bottle out from the crate here, probably. That's the most likely one. Because why would you... Hold on, let me bring it up again. Why would you lean over all the way to pick it up, hand side correct, like right side up, when you can just lean over slightly more, have a very casual grip, which is also upside down, and then flip it over in your hand afterwards. Anyway. To pull it out of the crate. And that's a lot of grape juice, Mr. Wright. Don't worry, justice won't leave until justice is done. Hey, that's me! Perhaps the defense would care to enlighten the court? What evidence do you have to explain why the fingerprints on the bottle are upside down? Right here. Olga's photo. It's actually easier to show you than explain, Your Honor. Place the bottle on the floor next to your chair. Excuse me? On the floor? Yes. Yes, now reach down and pick it up. Without getting out of your chair. See? You naturally go to pick up the bottle by its neck. With your fingers upside down. Look at this photograph. God, I did it by accident. Look at this photograph. Take it on the night of the murder. The defendant, Mr. Wright, sat here, playing piano, bottles of grape juice on the floor, to the side of his piano bench. He would have naturally picked up the bottles upside down several times. Wow, I can't believe that was that simple. Recall our dinner that evening, Kristoff. I was drinking my usual juice then, too. Basically, you used the bottle on the table to do the deed. But then you must have remembered. So you went and picked up one of the bottles from under the piano, and you switched the bottles. You took one of Mr. Wright's bottles and made it look like the murder weapon. What do you have to say to these charges, Mr. Gavin? Fascinating. So this is the legendary attorney's famed tactic of misdirection. What? You claim that I switched the bottle. Where's your proof? Proof? Well, that's, as I thought. More baseless conjecture. I'm afraid your bottle of proof is quite empty. Objection! I wouldn't be so sure about that. Your Honor, when you initiated the investigation of the hideout earlier, you recall that I requested an additional investigation? Oh, yes, I have your memo about that here. Retrieve the bottles from under the piano at the Borscht Bowl Club. And here's one of the bottles in question. What are you going to dust that for fingerprints too? I'd be surprised if any were on that but his. But what if there was a card in there? Mr. Gavin probably wouldn't make such a novice mistake, true. And that bottle wouldn't bear a trace of anything. Say, Apollo, why don't you go ahead and examine that bottle? But why? Look for a specific card. Just humor me. Shut the fuck up and do it, Apollo. That bottle will solve this case once and for all. What? That's some bottle. There's something inside the bottle. It's a screw on top. Maybe it is a bottle of grape juice and not wine. fucking... Could you imagine twist top wine? That sounds terrible. That card! It can't be! Recall that unpleasant woman's testimony for a moment. Miss Olga O'Reilly? Yes, our little swindling Devochka. That night I planted the card like I was supposed to. And Wright lost the last hand just like he was supposed to. And then Smith searched him. But the planted card was gone. The trap failed. Wait. This isn't... You're telling me that this is the planted card you disposed of? The one you mentioned in this piece of testimony? I happened to put my hand in my pocket and found a card. Yes, I snuck a peek at it and found it was the Five of Hearts. I had a feeling something might happen, so I disposed of the card. Before the game. Disposed? Where? There was an empty bottle of grape juice I had been drinking right beside me. I threw the card inside the bottle. The Five of Hearts. The Five of Hearts. This is the card. The bottles were swapped. And the only one who could have done that was the fourth person in the club that night. You, Mr. Christoph Gavin! Break down, break down. The lobster, no! That is all. This your idea of revenge, Phoenix Wright? Revenge? Revenge for the events that took away your attorney's badge 7 years ago. My past is like my logic, straight and true. Nothing's changed. All I did was point the finger of justice in the proper direction. Ha! Ha ha! I get it. He's talking about my finger. Fine. I'm glad we could have this little tete-a-tete, right? Is that even the correct pronunciation of that? Tete-a-tete. There we go. This is insane. What about me? Don't I get to prosecute anyone? No. Tete-a-tete. 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 TT-a-TT. Google said otherwise. A tete-a-tete. A tete-a-tete. Unless Google's also wrong. Oh well. We won't linger on that too much. I believe this time we've finally come to the end of our trial. Mr. Payne, do you have a report for us on Christoph Gavin? It depends on if English or French, I guess. Yeah. English sucks. He's admitted everything. We're processing his arrest now. I see. Still, one has to wonder why he would do such a thing. He didn't even have a connection to the victim. Well, it's a French word for head-to-head. True. He didn't even have a connection to the victim, did he? None that we know of. Mr. Wright, have you anything to add? I'm afraid I can't shed any more light on the matter. About this victim, Mr. Shady Smith. His occupation was listed as traveler. An odd profession to be sure, and that's all we know about him. I'll arrange a follow-up investigation, Your Honor. Good. Mr. Wright? Yes? 7 years, and you still haven't lost your touch. Christoph Gavin. Christoph Gavin was a man with Christoph Gavin was a man with much significance for me, both as a friend and a lawyer. He was extremely talented, to be sure. I needed two things before I could confront him. The first was a place where no injustice would be tolerated, this courtroom. The second was a man who could tolerate no injustice. In other words, a defensive attorney. You, Apollo. Me? This is a dark time for our legal system. A dark age. of the law, you could say. A twisting of justice brought on by our very own initial trial system. We have to set it right. Mr. Wright. Our work lies ahead of us, and I, for one, am looking forward to it. Well, this seems like a good time to announce a verdict. This court finds the defendant, Mr. Phoenix Wright, not guilty! Woo! Yeah! Woo! Confetti! Amazing! Superb! Court is adjourned. We have brought justice for the lobster. Thanks, Apollo. You came through, just like I thought you would. I'm pretty sure I didn't do a thing in there. It was you who courted Mr. the killer. I couldn't have done it by myself. You sensed it too today, didn't you? Your ability. Ability? Yes. The sensitivity I lack. And you'll come to understand it soon enough. Wait, I wonder if he means... Head scratch. Neck scratch. Weird vibe. He knows I can feel bad vibes. What was that, Mr. Wright? You'll have to find the answer to that question yourself. The answer. Right. I'll just have to play Persona 3. Today was full of questions without answers. Most of them about Mr. Gavin. What possible reason could he have had to commit murder? Perhaps you'll learn that in the days to come. Huh? Wait. You don't know, do you? This locket is the key. Huh? Oh, that reminds me. I met the girl whose picture is in your locket. Your daughter, right? That's right. She's my daughter. You know, you were right about this locket. Huh? I took this off his neck the night he died. But it looks like our dear Russian scam artist saw me. So the truth is, this locket really did belong to him. Wait, but that's perjury! You testified! You said that locket was yours! Well, it's in my possession. I said no such thing, actually. Well, I merely said that it was a locket with my daughter's picture inside. A subtle distinction, but a distinction nonetheless. And it's the truth. Wait, but then... Why? Why was the victim wearing a locket with a picture of your daughter inside it? 1, you can change the picture of the locket. 2, that's going to be revealed later. Sometimes the straightest path to the truth isn't the best one. Give it time. You're still just getting started with your career. Speaking of which, I may be out of a job. I work for Gavin Law Offices, after all. Still can't believe I just saw Mr. Gavin get led away in handcuffs. Apollo. Yes? How about coming to work for me? Huh? You mean at the Wright & Company law offices? I mean, there's not a single attorney in my generation that doesn't know it. I can't imagine that to be true, but... Wait, but didn't you... You're not a... Oh, I turned in my badge, yes. I'm not an attorney anymore. That incident 7 years ago. That legendary trial. And at the middle of it all was one man. Phoenix Wright. The case reached its sad conclusion, and he left law for good. Have you ever thought about coming back to the courts? I'm not qualified to stand in the court of basketball, I'm afraid. Didn't you notice in today's trial? There was a single piece of forged evidence. Forged evidence? What are you talking about? I'm talking about evidence that shouldn't have existed. Naughty magician's trick. A piece of evidence struck me as odd, it's true. It just seemed, well, too perfect. I bet this was the piece of forged evidence. Badge! This was the evidence! Let's go! Or maybe you didn't notice. Guess that wasn't it. No matter, I'll tell you. What was this? card that girl gave me. Frankly, this couldn't have been found at the scene of the crime. Why? Because the killer took it with him when he left. Leaving the wrong card in its place? Leaving the wrong card in its place. Lucky for us. Luckily for us. Court can't accept this evidence. It's a fraud! How can you be so sure? The real killer. My verdict was already handed down 7 years ago. Then, you really? Yeah, I forged this card. One look at the crime scene should have told you it wasn't real. But you can't do something like that and call yourself an attorney? Who's calling themselves an attorney, Apollo? So it's true. Rumor's true! 7 years ago. None of that matters much now, does it? You made me use forged evidence, fuck you! I punched him. It's your story for here on out, Apollo. Perhaps I can help you turn the next page. My office's address. Drop in if you like. Mr. Wright. Oh, about your uppercut. Try yelling, "Take that!" next time. I find it packs a little more punch. And Apollo, thanks for today. I had a good time. And with that, Mr. Wright walked out the door. And that's how my first trial ended, using forged evidence. A lot of mysteries went unsolved. And, at the time, I had no idea they were all related. Every mystery that day, connected by a single thread of logic. I'd find that out soon enough. My name is Apollo Justice, attorney at law. And this is how my story begins. And this is my story. And I need food. Save your current progress? Absolutely. Save complete. And that is case 1 done. About 3 hours for the stream. I'm gonna cut things here. Who's streaming right now? Blah, 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 blah. Following, because that's something I need to click for some reason. Well,
my name is Apollo Justice. I feel vibes and present badges.
Thanks, Rathalos. Oh my god, Pie's doing Mario Party 3. Super hard. Is that where I want to send people? Yeah, sure, why not? Oh, Alan's actually doing StarCraft. Food War, blind playthrough. We're doing that. That sounds so much better. Alright. Thanks for stopping by. I'm going to do more Apollo Justice. I'm going to keep them to Saturday, Sundays. That way I have 2 days that I can dedicate to the cases if need be. I don't know if I'm going to need 2 days for the next 2 cases, but probably for the 4th one I'm going to. So this lines up very well. Anyway, thanks so much for stopping by. Until then.